Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Iran knows that the West is stupid.
Yes.
They know that they will see dead babies, or we can lie about the number of dead babies, and all of a sudden it'll flip the script. It'll flip the script. So when he says have a point, he's saying, well, you can't kill Palestinian babies. You can kill Israeli babies. You can behead Israeli babies because they're white and because their parents stole land. I mean, all because of this nonsense. But they're stuck on the narrative and the brilliance of Hamas's war strategy. It's a war strategy.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like it. What's the war strategy? Collateral damage is our advantage.
Let's start. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Western Spirit. Today we have another episode from New York. We have a few of those lately, so we used our time in New York to meet interesting and important people. That it's good to get their perspectives on life and what's happening here and everywhere. Today we have a very, very special guest. Thane Rosenbaum is a novelist, essayist, and distinguished university professor. He's the director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society, hosted by Torah University. He's a legal analyst for CBS News Radio, and someone who writes. We're going to talk about a few of his opinion pieces that I found interesting in the Jewish journal that you write at. So, Thane, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Happy to be on your podcast, Ariel.
Thank you so much. So I want to start about something that you sent me that you found interesting, thought we should talk about your speak with Bernard Henri Levy.
Yes, he has a new book out.
Yes. And so maybe first of all, tell us one of the things that you said that you started the conversation by saying this might be the first time in Jewish history when a French Jew and an American Jew on different continents can look out their windows and see the exact same thing. What did you mean by that?
Well, anti-Semitism has never been so globalized and pervasive. So, for instance, the example I gave in that interview was the Dreyfus affair in the late 19th century and 20th century. If you were in Europe, you'd know about it if you were Jewish. But if you were in France, Paris in particular, you'd be afraid to go outside. If you lived in Brooklyn, it would make a difference to you at all, right? You might have had some, but no one was screaming about the Dreyfus affair.
Yes.
Similarly, even during the Holocaust, if you were in any one of the certain major European capitals and you were Jewish, you were worried about if Nazis invaded your country, what would happen to you. That was not a fear of Jews in America. Right. Their hope was that the war would stay away from America and that Hitler would never be here. Now we see a globalized anti-Semitism, whether it's in university life or publishing or major media, mainstream media, or in political parties. Jews around the world, whether they live in Israel or the diaspora, are feeling the sort of the premonitions of the 1930s.
Why is that? So I guess all that you just said nothing new about it. We all feel it. If you're watching me in Israel, which I usually come from, if you're watching me in the US, where we have a large audience and hopefully may it grow. But why is this happening? So is it just because we have media and everybody's talking to each other? Or is there something more pernicious, an ideology that maybe wasn't there a few years ago? I seem to think that I spoke with Ayan Hirsi Ali, and one of the things...
Good friend of mine.
Yeah, so she's a great woman, and she's someone who we should all learn from. Let's put it that way. And one of the things that she said was that there's a diplomatic agreement, so to speak, between the radical left and the Islamists. The first thing that you need to do is sort of like Hitler and the communists. At the end of the day, we'll beat each other up, but first we need to beat the Jews, so to speak. So, how do you see where are we going from here with this?
So I would say there's two things that make this very different. One is that never before has anti-Semitism been packaged in such a way that it could be not only consumer friendly, accessible, but righteous.
Yeah.
That somehow, and this happened through mostly academia and the mainstream press, you had this idea that hating Jews was a human rights issue on behalf of Palestinians. Naturally, we should kill the Jews because of what they've done to the poor Palestinians.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I'm not really a Jew hater per se.
I'm an anti-Zionist.
I'm an anti-Zionist, and more especially, I'm a pro-Palestinian.
Yeah.
They're really incredibly beautiful people, very passive, would never harm anybody, brilliant. They win all Nobel Prizes. And you could say anything nowadays. People will repeat it. And so they, saying the poor Palestinians, I cannot tell you how often I've been told that in university campuses. It's not even poor Palestinians. It's always poor Palestinians. Yeah. And so, never before has anti-Semitism been given this kind of a green
framing.
light, a framing and an acceptance, yes. A social and intellectual acceptance. Yeah. I am a human rights activist, and therefore I hate Jews. This is very different from spreading rumors about Jews killing Christian children to make matzah. That is ridiculous. And so Christian anti-Semitism spent, a millennia with this nonsense from the Middle Ages. Now it's different. Jews are killing Palestinian children and babies. They're not using to make matzah. They're just doing. Yeah, exactly. They love to kill kids. They always did. They love to use their blood. There's a book in the United States come out by an absolutely ignorant, illiterate professor who won a book award, who wrote The Right to Maim.
To maim?
Maim, M-I-M-A-M-A-I-M, as if to say the right to maim. And her point is that the IDF intentionally maims Palestinian children and poisons the water.
For what purpose?
To cripple the Palestinian people. In order
to cripple physically, that all the Palestinians be crippled?
And killed, poisoned, so that Israel can continue to steal land. Now, she provides no evidence for this, and she admits when you spoke to her, interviewer, she would say, well, it's maybe more metaphorical. That's the other problem, which is that we've allowed academia to be non-academic. We allow not just imbeciles, but anti-Semites to just say whatever they want to say, and that they've created a propaganda arm that is better than what Mao had in China and Stalin had in the Soviet Union. You have academics that don't publish anything, that are not interested in anything other than hating Jews. That's their main mission. You have a lot of brainless, impressionable students that listen to what these professors say, and they've been radicalized. We know, I think it's right, $9 billion has been donated by Qatar to American universities, and therefore Middle East studies programs.
In how long?
In the last 15 years.
Oh, that's a lot of money.
Right. And that's not including the Saudi arm. It's $9 billion just Qatar. Qatar funds Hamas.
Yeah.
Qatar funds Al Jazeera. So you see what happened to the universities. You can see why college presidents are terrified. The college presidents are not worried about Jews withdrawing money. They're aligned. They don't care. They're terrified of the faculty. Yeah. The presidents of the universities live in fear of the faculty and students, and they will tell many Jewish a billionaire to go away. If you don't want to give us the money, we don't care. I'll tell you what we're not doing. We're not infringing on the free speech rights of people who hate Jews. If you hate Jews, you have the right to do this. So that's one idea. The second thing is something that I think Yinon and I have talked about over.
Could I just push back on one thing, and then we'll get back to it? Just to understand. One of the things that until October 7th, what I knew about college campuses in America, admittedly, I haven't been here in years, and obviously not the college campuses, was that it was very, if you hurt anyone's feelings in today's in American universities, microaggressions were off bounds. No one really knows to explain to you anything could be a microaggression. If anyone says you did a microaggression to them, you were ostracized. You could have been punished by the university itself. You had these courts inside university for different aggressions. There was safe rooms and safe places where people, different things like that. If someone seemed to say something that was a little bit off color to certain protected groups, you were ostracized and your career could be destroyed. Even as a professor that had tenure, if you said something that could be perceived as being somehow racist or sexist or all these other ists, you would be destroyed, canceled, as they used to say. But then October 7th happens, and you have you just mentioned numerous instances, hundreds, maybe even thousands of instances where faculty and students are not doing microaggressions, they're aggressions. not only are some of them are celebrating for October 7th and calling for more October 7th. Students are harassing other Jewish students walking in campus. And the same places where microaggressions would be out of bounds are accepting this. So it's all money, or is there an ideology behind it?
No, there's an ideology.
What is that ideology?
Ideology is these aren't aggressions. They have nothing. Why are you calling them aggressions, Ariel?
Why are they aggressions?
Because they're human rights causes. They have nothing to do with aggression.
To beat up a Jewish student?
Absolutely. This is how sadistic and crazy it is. That they're saying, yes, Jews do not deserve to be safe. They are white privileged oppressors.
Wow.
And we do not allow white privileged oppressors. We scream shame at them. We harass them on campus. We call them out for being white privileged oppressors who are complicit because they're not doing something to stop their people. Right? They're not doing so for instance, here's an example. I have a new book coming out on the war in Gaza. You know, the Uyghurs in China, right? We're talking millions, right? Right. No one runs into a Chinese restaurant in the United States and screams at the Chinese owners of restaurants.
Exactly.
Look what you've done to the Uyghurs, right? You'd be arrested and thrown out of the restaurant. In America, just last week, a crowd of Islamists barricaded Jewish students at City College. It's only 100 blocks from here.
We're recording in Manhattan. So
right.
Yeah.
So 100 blocks from here, Ariel. There was a Jewish deli, and a number of Jewish students were chased into the deli. This has been reported. It's incredible that this can actually happen. And the Muslim students were wearing keffiyehs and were screaming and taunting for the Jews to come out.
Wow.
Right. And if you ask them, they'd say, this is not threatening. We are doing what a righteous human rights activist would do. So that's really what's different. The aggressions, the micro or macro aggressions, only apply to people of color. They don't apply to white oppressors.
Wait, why are the Jews not people of color?
Because everything about what people understand about Israel is wrong. Everything, right? Everything from land grabbing to not having an ancestral connection to the land itself, to the fact that all of the Israelis are from Brooklyn or Brookline or Brentwood. None of them have any connection to, the Middle East. They're all just white-skinned Ashkenazis who really come from Poland, the entire country. So, everything, the stealing of the land, everything about the
history of the conflict,
the Palestinians not, refusing 5 peace offers. Nobody knows anything. Some Irish student came up to me screaming. People scream at me all day, so I'm used to it. I assume that's how people converse nowadays. When it comes,
I haven't screamed yet, so we're fine.
Yeah, not yet. But boy, this is a friendly environment. But someone was screaming at me about, you call yourself a human rights professor. Yeah. Let me tell you, I'm from Ireland, and let me tell you why the Irish people hate Israel. And I said, well, I know they do, but why do you think they do? They said, in 1967, when Israel became a country, he didn't finish there. He stopped. He said, the first thing they did was take American tanks and kick the Palestinians off Palestine, out of the land.
That's what
Palestine.
happened.
Yeah. And I go, wow. I said to him, he said, you call yourself a law professor. I said, well, let me just tell you, every single thing you just said is just factually wrong. You need to do some more reading, like every single word. But this is what gets repeated. And this person's walking around with a sense of rage at Jews. So part of the problem is that Jews do not count in the calculus of microaggressions, requiring no Jew deserves a safe space. They deserve an unsafe space to punish them for what Israel's done. The other thing is something that I mentioned with Ayan that she might have mentioned, but I know she and I have talked about that, and I've spoken about this in my lectures and classes and writings, is the idea of moral relativism, which is huge, and people don't understand what that is. Well, we're living in an era in which we're not able to make distinctions between right and wrong. Yes. This is better than this. This system of government is better than this system of government. The way these people conduct themselves is better than this. That is complete imperialistic, racist, the idea that you can make judgments, fundamental distinctions between right and wrong. And so what you have is this twisted idea that people, Arabs and Muslims, like to cut off heads. What business of that is ours?
Who am I to judge?
Who am I to judge? They like it. They like it. They like to cut off heads. What? You don't? Okay, so don't.
Right.
You like to watch the New York Yankees. They like to cut off heads. Is there a difference? I go, yeah, there really is a difference. Well, not in a world of moral relativism, where you basically say to other cultures, and especially cultures of brown skin, you're supposed to listen to them. They're filled with automatic virtue. And if you're white, you're automatically guilty. Yeah. So if a person of dark skin is cutting off heads, it must be a good idea. And this insanity is something that is fed throughout academia, in major museums, in publishing houses, in intellectual circles.
I guess my next question would be, why is it fed? So you've been around the block. You're in universities a lot of years, and you write a lot of stuff. You meet a lot of people. I assume 20, 30 years ago was this, to say the moral relativism and the way that it is applied today is not something that you would have seen 20, 30 years ago, right?
Well, because
on this scale.
No, well, partly because they ran out of other ideologies. They ran out of, communism fell. I mean, if you think about what kept academics busy. I mean, look, I've been, unfortunately, in universities most of my professional life, but if you're in a university, there's something wrong with you. If you're a professor, there's something wrong with you. I mean, these are very,
disturbed individuals
and lazy. They don't do anything. They don't publish anything. And nowadays we hire people not on the basis of their academic merit. We hire them on the basis of diversity or representation. So we don't care if you're smart, but you represent a group or an identity that's different. And that's nice. That's important. We need to reward that group with you. Give you the PhD, and
God forbid we should have all white people.
Yeah. So I'm saying, but the people who worked in universities ran out of communism and deconstructionism and postmodernism. They blew through that, and they ended up on something called anti-colonialism. That's what it was like, a game of musical chairs. And they just kept bouncing from thing to thing to thing until they stopped at colonialism. Then they basically decided, the worst thing that's ever happened is how white people went to other countries and colonized them, raped them, destroyed their culture, destroyed their livelihoods, and enslaved them. And that's what we're focusing on, to decolonize everyone. Yeah. So that's where white privileges come from. So they even applied colonization to the United States, not just what was done to the native people in the United States, but just the privileges that white people have that they have to atone for. Automatically, every child is guilty if he or she is white.
And the facts don't matter, right? Because, for example, a black middle-class family living in the suburbs of D.C. is still less privileged than a white family living in Appalachia that works in the coal mines and is all dying.
Yeah, and you want to know where the Trump supporters are.
Right.
That's where they are. Because they look at that and go, I don't feel privileged.
Exactly.
If anyone looked at my family history for 3 generations in Appalachia, I do not feel like an oppressor of people of color. I don't even get near a person of color. I'm not in that. I don't know what you're talking about. And you're right. A middle-class person that grew up in the suburb and has a house in Martha's Vineyard.
And happens to be black.
Yeah, well, Barack Obama.
Yeah, but he's an extreme example because he's very rich. But even a middle-class someone.
No, but he had that advantage before he was very rich.
Right.
He grew up in Hawaii. His name was Barry. He praises his father who abandoned him and has nothing to say about his mother and grandmother who put him on a path that he would lead. Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So this is an example of this is a lot of I did an event recently with Sage Steele, formerly of ESPN. I did an event with my own nonprofit, folks.org, which is my own Ariel show. And I did with her, and she had a similar problem. People who are biracial in the United States who are successful are supposed to say that their blackness is what makes them special, unique, and great. And there are some people biracial who are not prepared to disown their white family. They're not prepared to say, no, I'm not going to, I think my mother was very responsible for somewhat of what I get. It's not just the magic of my dark skin. So I just think that what we've seen is this, again, the moral relativism, and the fact that what we now live in, what's worse than being called a racist is to be called a colonialist. Yes. So hence, what do we call Israel? Settler colonialists, yeah. Right? So we latched onto this sin. This is the greatest sin of all.
Even though it's not true, because I had an episode with Neil Ferguson, Professor Neil Ferguson.
I know Neil.
And he explained how even if that is the worst thing ever and all the caveats, it's just not true. So, yeah. So it's like, even if you believe settler colonialism is the worst thing ever, and there's nothing more important than that, which is at this stage in history, stupid in my opinion. But even if it's not true. So like you said, facts don't matter anymore.
No, it doesn't matter. Again, as I said, it's ideological. Yeah. What they stopped with was the word colonial. And this is where Israel fell into this pocket, which is why 50% of Israelis that are Mizrahi is a very inconvenient truth.
Or Ethiopian Jews.
They don't, and by the way, no one knows that.
No one knows.
Nobody knows Jews. Any. They're black Jews. They don't know anything. Yeah. I mean, I just read something recently, saw something on somebody. People send me stuff all the time, as if I don't know how bad it is. I know it's bad. Some student was saying Arabs in Israel are in a ghetto and they're not allowed to leave their ghetto and they're not allowed to vote and they're not allowed to have jobs. And somehow this moron is in some Ivy League school and is walking around and repeating this. So the main difference between now and 30 years ago is 30 years ago, everyone was thinking about Marxism, but not
in the universities.
In universities, in intellectual life. We still have Marxism, but now Marxism is attached to color. It's the same idea, but it's attached to color. And if people of color are sanctified and people without color are demonized.
So I guess my next question would be let's put it this way. Does the fact that more and more Americans are going to academia, so like 30 years, I don't know the exact numbers, you probably would gauge it better than me, but it seems to me that it used to be that a minority of Americans actually went to college. Now it's much more in the mainstream. And so what happens is, because maybe 30, 40 years ago, maybe, like you said, Marxism and all these other isms that are very, very negative influence on society, in my opinion. I guess professors would disagree, but whatever. No one would really hear them because it was a minority of a minority. But today everybody wants to go to college. And the type of person colleges are creating are almost a leech on society, because they're all being indoctrinized in all the things that you just said. And then they're coming out of college and they're trying to impose this worldview on all of us in the West and in America specifically.
Look, I was in Israel not long ago before the pandemic. Maybe it was a few years before the pandemic. And I was doing a number of lectures in universities and think tanks. And I said things that I regret. People asked me about, DEI. They talked about BDS. And I said, look, this is confined to the really bad universities. No legitimate person, either an academic, believes in the BDS movement. This is, the Students for Justice in Palestine. They're there to get a D. They're not going to law school. They're not going to go to medical school. You're there to join SJP, legitimate schools. I didn't know that not long thereafter, the whole movement would be led by the Ivy League. I'm often wrong, and I was very wrong there. So, I actually think what's happened in the last year, I'm hoping. I mean, I want to see, and I've been in the academia for years, and unfortunately, my children went to Ivy League schools. I'm not proud of that. It doesn't mean anything to me, but they did. But that there should be a blowback. There should be a reaction. Why would you send your students to school?
To Columbia.
Why? Why would you send them to Columbia or to be harassed? But even still, even if you're not Jewish, that doesn't look like an environment for learning. It looks like an environment to radicalize and to hate. It doesn't make you feel like that's where you're going to read the great books. You know why? Because they don't read the great books, because they're written by white people. So now that you have,
they actually take out from syllabuses books by white people because they're white people?
Oh, God, yeah. Well, there's been a rejection. Columbia and Chicago still maintains it. I don't know about Columbia, but they were known for that if you showed up for the first 2 years in our college, you're required to read the ancient Greeks and the great books. That is all stopped. Why? Well, they're racists.
Oh, yes.
Right? The colonials, they're all racist, so you can't read them. So you read books by people who can't write and have written nothing, garbage, but at least it represents something as opposed to being good.
It's a DEI of books.
Right, the DEI of books. So what I'm saying is these nonsense majors, gender studies, indigenous literature, queer theory study, these are not courses. I know people teach them, but you would pay $7,000 to take a course like that or to major in that. So I would say no one's getting a job from that, nor anyone should hire anybody who is, if I saw someone who was studied, indigenous literature, I would assume they're illiterate. I would assume you mean you didn't read the great books.
It would be worse if they would be literate, because then they would be trying to push ideologies on your coworkers.
Well, we learned this at the New York Times.
Yeah.
Here's something that was a shock. Again, I'm often wrong. Here's another example. What happened with the editorial page of the New York Times, which essentially launched Barry Weiss,
right?
But all this, as you may recall,
with Tom Cotton,
op-ed, was all emanating out of that. The idea, and then you saw there were a number of books that were canceled in major publishing houses because they were written by conservatives.
Mm-hmm. And we interviewed Abigail Schreier.
Oh, sure.
She wrote a book. I'm not going to go over the whole book, but about the trans situation. You could agree with her. You don't have to agree with her. But she was taken off shelves at major chains all over the U.S. because people were protesting her book. Again, you could write a book against her. That's the whole point of arguing a discussion. But the point is that they've been shutting down discussion and of people that they disagree with their ideas. They disagree with their skin color.
Right.
Which is it's the worst of, it's like
50% of the Jewish writers that were being published in the UK can't get published now.
Wow.
There was a recent study that showed publishers are not, it has nothing to do with, you don't have to write about Israel.
Right.
You just have to be Jewish. So this is university life. This is intellectual life. The New York Times should have fired everyone who signed that petition. They should have said, I don't think you fully understand what a newspaper does. I don't know how we hired you, but something went wrong with you in college. It never occurred to me. I always assumed you believed in this nonsense in college, but you better stop because you will be punished if you start speaking nonsense in the commercial private sphere. Yeah. And instead, you found places like Simon & Schuster in the New York Times literally terrified of a bunch of children who were having a tantrum instead
they
of
gave it to them and fired the op-ed editor, James Bennett.
Yeah, they fired the editor. They fired everyone else. And
all of his deputies.
All the people punishing, are you ready for this? A United States senator who had an opinion that the National Guard might need to be called out to quell the violence emanating from the George Floyd.
I can't believe it.
Yeah. Now, by the way, here's something that people didn't want to talk about, which I wrote about and spoke about. The National Guard is a recent phenomenon. You know when it was brought out? To integrate schools in the South on behalf of black students. So don't treat the National Guard as a racist entity.
Everything is racist today.
So the idea that, to me, that the National Guard can't be called out, I'm saying, wait a minute. The University of Mississippi was integrated. Little Rock Elementary School and high school were integrated thanks to the men and women of the National Guard. Let's not, and so that for a senator who's raising the idea. But again, ideas are not welcome. Free speech is not welcome. Open inquiry is not welcome. What is a university then offering?
Indoctrination.
Yeah. So I don't know if this trend of sending kids to college, I think more people are going to look honestly and say, I don't see why I would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on that.
I think it's already happening. There was just a study they were numbers that showing like Yeshiva University got way more students that were transferring.
Yeah. My university, Touro University, same thing, benefited from this.
So the universities that are more aligned with, I think it's sad to say, but there will be universities for woke people and maybe universities for normal people. Let's put it that way. One thing that is interesting in what you're saying is that it seems to me, and tell me if you agree, that all this stuff that we just talked about looking for race in every possible place, even where it isn't, and this whole settler colonialist looking for it even where it isn't, and this anti-Semitism that's more nuanced. It's not the eating the matzahs, it's just killing them. And all the things that we just said seems to be permeating the left of the political left, meaning the Democrat Party seems to have a very up-and-coming wing. So it's not, every time you say you'll mention it, people who are Democrats, strong Democrats will say, yeah, it's just a few people, the party, you see, the bipartisan bill, most of the people voted for it. But that's not the point. The point is that you have the younger generation of Democrats, the new guns, the young Turks, so it used to be an old term. There's a big faction that believes in this stuff. First of all, you have the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party in the Congress. But besides that, when you ask in polls, younger Democrat voters, they've bought into this stuff.
Right. As you said, they've been educated through it. So, and it's cool.
Yeah.
If you want to be the cool kid, you say what the cool kids say. And the cool kids hate Jews.
Yeah.
And they hate Israel. And they make bizarre comparisons. Israel and South Africa, Israel and the Nazis, right? And you can do this without any compunction because it's popular, it's fashionable to speak in those terms. But the Democratic Party, part of the problem was Joe Biden. We were talking about a very weak leader, an elderly man who was never impressive, even when he was a young man.
Tell me about it.
Number one. Number two, he was very beholden to the progressive wing of the party. He would never have gotten the nomination had it not been for the African-American Black Caucus.
Clyburn
and those people, right? The people that fill in, that's the very substantial caucus, the Black, I forgot what it's called, the Black Congressional Delegation or whatever, the squad. These were people who were loud and noisy, and they made it possible for him to get the nomination. He picked up on the zeitgeist of the culture. He used words that he didn't understand. Mm-hmm. The worst thing that faces our country is white supremacy. It's not. It's preposterous. He didn't know what it was. He used to also use the word systemic racism. It's not. Yeah. It had been until the civil rights movement, right? In fact, I wrote about this and saying that what we've done is completely degraded and devalued the extraordinary amount of racial progress and advancement that has happened since the 1960s. Speaking of Barack Obama, not only was he 2 terms elected, he received more white votes than his Republican challenger. So where's the racism? 2 secretaries of state in a row, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, were African-American. The idea that
Attorney General under Obama.
Systemic means the system, if anything, is set up to prejudice white people. Right. The system is set up, and I can give you many examples, whether it's fair housing, public accommodations.
Done a number of episodes on specifically that.
Yeah. I mean, the governmental programs designed to lift African-American, that's systemic. Yes. There's no systemic.
It's official policy.
Right. It's the official policy. So
Biden is beholden to that.
Yeah. And people started repeating stupid things. And if you repeat it enough.
What about the current, he became too old. Yeah. He collapsed on the debate stage. Now we have another candidate. Seems to me that she's went to meet the mayor of Dearborn.
Yeah.
Who after October 7th celebrated it. The Dearborn
They're baking a cake right now for the first year anniversary.
Exactly. The Dearborn was the jihad capital of America.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
It's not was. It is. It's going to get worse.
Yeah, and it
is where you started to for the first time America is starting to see something that we didn't. The burning of American flags is now in America. Europe saw this for years. Yeah. There's been an enormous amount of buyer's remorse of the Syrian refugees that were led into Europe by millions by numbers, certainly led by Germany. The Germans, I hope this has been the best thing that's ever happened to Israel, because the German people see that their country has been literally destroyed. And, we've got in France, you have the no-go zones, the incredible amounts of violence. America was free of this until Dearborn. Now we're seeing death to America and the burning of American flags. This is going to continue to get worse.
Yes.
And the Europeans were looking at us thinking, are you not watching what's going on over here? And the answer is no, we weren't. And speaking as a Jewish public intellectual, I do hundreds of different events throughout the year. For years, when I would talk at universities, certainly universities, but at synagogues or JCCs or Jewish federations or all other kinds of entities, and mention what was happening to French Jews since 2006, 2007, nobody believed me. They thought I was out of my mind when I told them about Ilan Halimi and the two Jewish grandmothers. One
kasher.
Yeah, right. The kosher market, the killings in the Jewish day school in Toulouse. People would look at me, the two Jewish boys that were stopped by a van. One of them had its fingers cut off. Right? People would look at me like I had just made that up. Thane, you're a novelist.
They couldn't comprehend.
Yeah, so we're starting to see this.
Yeah.
And if what you were saying about Kamala Harris, all I know is that
why is she meeting him?
She started off on the left.
Yes.
Biden always thought of himself as a moderate.
Yeah.
He was a moderate who became beholden to the progressive left, and he wasn't a strong enough leader to say, "Get out of my office."
Right.
Get out of my office. People don't speak like that in the Oval Office. Yeah. What did you just say about Jews? My children have married Jews. Get out of my office. That's what he should have said. Instead, he was like, well, let me offer you some cookies. And I'll repeat. What are the words I used to have to say? Systemic racism, right? White supremacy. And of course, Bibi Netanyahu's response is over the top, right? You can't say that Israel has a right to defend itself and use the word over the top. It can't, they're irreconcilable because the United States, no one used the word over the top when it came to defeating ISIS, when it came to defeating Al Qaeda, and when it came to getting Osama bin Laden. Nobody said anything about over the top. Over the top only applies when Jews are doing something.
Of course. But also, I think the difference is that he would let them into the office. She's going to their offices.
Yeah, and
that's the difference. Also, she met with the uncommitted voters. We all know why they're uncommitted, because they want her to be against Israel. And then it was leaked that she told them that she'll think about an embargo on weapons to Israel. She denies it. But my point is that why would they even think that she might be open to it? There's something that,
of course,
an ambivalence, even by one of the things that really was shameful was that the president of the United States goes to the DNC and he gives his keynote speech, even though they pushed him to like 1 o'clock at night. Everybody's sleeping. But he says, I assume this wasn't in his teleprompter. He says the protesters outside have a point.
Have a point.
What point do they have? That Hamas is good? That Israel needs to stop existing? What is the point that the president of the United States feels the need? And like you said, I think, and just to point out the obvious, that Biden throughout the years, he moved with the party. So wherever he thought the Democrat Party was ideologically, that's where he went. So he started off pushing out the crime bill. Then the Democrats were for the systemic racism, all that stuff. He would never talk about it 15, 20 years ago. He moved there. So he feels instinctively, I think, that that's where his constituency is.
Well, because he's not a brilliant guy.
Right,
Never
exactly.
was on his best day. So he's not a leader.
He has instinct.
Yeah, but what's happened is Israel simply has been outplayed for decades.
Yes.
The wars that they were able to win, the Muslims and the Arabs recognized there's another war that we could crush you on, which is we honestly don't care about our people. And they don't care about themselves either. We have a very different understanding. Ayaan Hirsi Ali would do this much better than me, and she has the bona fides to speak this way directly.
Yeah, we spoke about that.
But the idea
cultures are different.
The martyrology, the martyrdom of the Muslims is really quite remarkable. Yeah. And the Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Iran knows that the West is stupid.
Yes.
They know that they will see dead babies, or we can lie about the number of dead babies, and all of a sudden it'll flip the script.
Like
it'll flip the script. So when he says have a point, he's saying, well, you can't kill Palestinian babies. You can kill Israeli babies. You can behead Israeli babies because they're white and because their parents stole land. I mean, all because of this nonsense. But they're stuck on the narrative and the brilliance of Hamas's war strategy. It's a war strategy.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like it. What's the war strategy? Collateral damage is our advantage. We get the advantage
destroying
the more things that are destroyed, hospitals, schools, it's better for us because it embarrasses Israel and delegitimizes Israelis on the world stage. And we will allow the money that Qatar uses in the United States to infiltrate the minds of white students and basically convince them that Israel is the ultimate evil.
Yeah.
And Israel, I'm not sure what Israel could have done to stop it, but they were outplayed.
Yes.
The wars that they won on battlefields
They
were
mean
destroyed.
nothing.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme.
No one is interested in that history. They're interested. So when he says they have a point, he's saying, well, the absolute numbers are high.
Yeah.
And therefore, and some of them, or if not all of them, if you've listened to the Gaza Health Ministry,
they're all innocent.
Well, not only they're all innocent,
They're all babies.
They're all babies. It would be Israel's aim would be so extraordinary. They never killed the terrorist.
Exactly.
Israel can't kill a terrorist.
I want to just ask a very weird question. So maybe it's not weird, but it seems to me the obvious one, but probably it's not politically correct. Why do Jews then overwhelmingly vote Democrat? Because I think you even wrote about this. You touched on it. Why, if the Democrat Party is beholden to this ideology that sees Jews as white? I mean, it's weird that I'm saying, what's the problem with white? But we explained. They see white as a problem, and Jews are the whitest of the white, because Jews are not only white, but they're colonialists and
well said.
Whatever we just said. So why do the Jews continue to vote for the Democrats?
Well, first of all, there's a myth. You know what the myth is? Might shock your audience. Jews aren't that smart.
Tell me about it.
They can get into law school and medical schools. Anyone can get into a law school, for God's sakes. It's not that impressive. Jewish grandmothers are running around right now. My little Sammy, God, any moron can get in. Mm-hmm. They're not smart. Jews are very good at renovated kitchens, at renovating houses, finding a nice place to live in the summer, getting a good deal on a business array. Most Jews have no idea about anything when it comes to what it's like for Jews around the world. They really don't. They see themselves insulated from it. Their children have married out of the religion. They're not affiliated with the synagogue. They're not paying attention. They see what's happening in Israel as another planet. It has nothing to do with them. They've never been to Israel. They didn't grow up with, or they're the Jews, unfortunately, of the Reform movement and the Tikkun Olam Jews, the Jews that believe that Torah, ritual, history matters not. The only thing that matters is that I can demonstrate social justice. I can demonstrate what a great Jew I am by being on behalf of others and to criticize my own people. Look, I call it moral narcissism, right? Look at me. Look at me. Look how righteous I am. I hate my people. I hate Israel. I once gave them money for a tree. I wish I could take that money back and chop the tree down. They don't deserve my love. Yeah. You've injured me personally, Israel, and now I must hate you. Yeah. And I want to sit at the cool table and lunch. And the cool table at lunch have people who hate Israel. Yeah. And again, Jews just simply, as I'm saying, they're not that smart. They're actually seduced by the cool kids table.
But what you do say is that
so you have a very minority people already, and they're not in any way, there's no consensus. Mm-hmm. They don't see a sense of intellectual or spiritual or religious or historical consensus or coherence. So the numbers themselves of people who are active and aware and alert and Zionistic and know Jewish history and recognize the threat to themselves. They see a threat. That is a very small number of Jews.
But 1 second, I don't understand. Take Israel aside. We just explained that it's not just Israel, it's Jews here. Meaning we explained that Jews are seen as white. Jews here are seen as white. Yeah. Jews here are being discriminated against. Jews here are in danger, for example, like we said, being beaten up in the way to class or outside their delis, and it'll probably get worse if there isn't any change in society. So why don't, leave Israel aside for a second. Why don't, as of their own interests, why do they keep voting for a party that thinks that way?
Two things. First of all, the Berlin Jews of the 1930s did not realize they weren't part of the Aryan race. It didn't occur to them. They fought in World War I. They were loyal. I don't know if anyone, I did an event and wrote about Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt, which played on Broadway. It was open in the West End, and it told the story of a Viennese, assimilated secular Viennese Jewish family from the very end of the 19th century, beginning with the Dreyfus Affair and the early days of Zionism through the Holocaust and what happens to this family. And this was a family that thought that Herzl was out of his mind. Who would want to move anywhere?
Right.
We are Viennese Jews. We're part of the culture. The Austrians need us. Who would support the painters and the musicians? We are the ones. We are Austrian culture. It never occurred to them. Herzl looked like a ridiculous lunatic. Freud was a lunatic. Everyone was a lunatic because they were purely Austrians. The same with the Berlin Jews. That is very true of the American Jews. American Jews, even if they see a threat, they assume someone I know.
It'll go away.
Yeah, it'll go away, or it applies to religious people. If you're not wearing a yarmulke, it doesn't affect me. My children didn't marry Jews. I don't care about Israel. All I have to do is tell people I'm not Jewish. That's all that matters. And I don't really care. Look, Jews knocked each other over to get to the front of the line to protest on behalf of Black Lives Matter. But most Jews, if they saw a rabbi get knocked down, they would not cross the street. They would never cross the street. So I'm saying they're not that smart, and they're not historically aware, and they're just not thinking. They're thinking about the wrong things.
Right.
So there's a long history in this country, starting with the Franklin Roosevelt, which is ironic since he literally abandoned the Jews of Europe. But Jews have overwhelmingly supported Democrats. Now, I would say that I just saw a poll recently that's
a lot closer.
It's a lot closer.
63rd.
Yeah, I did an event once with Eric Cantor, who in those days was the leading Republican, leading Jewish elected official in the United States. And I said, he was a Republican. I said the same thing. He said it drives us crazy in the Republican Party. It drives us nuts
that we can't get more of
that we can't get Jewish votes, given our support for Israel, and this was before the Squad. This is before what we've seen. Yeah. You would think that the events of the last year would have chipped away at that, but look, it had an effect. I left the Democratic Party about 6 months ago. I'm now an independent.
So
I'm
you used to be a Democrat.
Yeah.
Why were you a Democrat?
Well, I mean, I am a lot of what the Democratic Party supported before this new wave of progressivism is what I believed in.
So you're saying the party moved so to the extreme, like the crazy.
I'm an old school liberal. I call myself a 19th century liberal.
What does it mean to be an old school liberal?
It means that I am open to ideas.
Uh-huh.
I don't freak out if you disagree with me. I'm able to hold this idea here,
and talk about it.
Or say, you know what? I have to consider this. I'll be back. I'll get back to you. Nobody talks like this anymore.
No one talks like that.
No one is, instead of screaming at you, Ariel, because I don't
call you a racist.
I'll call you a racist. I'm saying, I don't think I agree with that, but I had never thought of that perspective before. Let me go home and think. I don't think it's going to change my mind, but I appreciate hearing your point of view. That's an old school liberal, which means that I'm open. It also means that I believe in free speech. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in open inquiry, right? I believe in the classic ideas that came out of the Enlightenment. And the progressive movement is Marxist.
Yeah.
The progressive movement is not the Enlightenment.
And
they are illiberal, anti-democratic. They are much more in common with Soviet-style 30s and Mao in China. The progressive movement is not liberal. They are illiberal.
And you're implying that you left the party because they've taken over the party.
Yeah, I mean, I saw what happened with a moderate with Biden.
Yeah,
I saw that
not a moderate.
This was not the party that I was a member of. This was becoming a party that was openly anti-Semitic and openly forgiving of anti-Semitism. Forgiving why? Well, if you're a person of color, you have virtue. You have the right to hate. Yeah. You have the right, and if you're white, you have to take it. And Jews, you really need to take it and stop talking about the Holocaust because you keep using the Holocaust as an excuse. So you just have to take it. And the minute I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, the minute somebody says it's time to forget about the Holocaust, Jews, you have to sit and take.
That's openly being said now in the.
Oh yeah, that is. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I remember a number of years ago at a public lecture, I once said that there was a woman that was teaching at I think Oberlin, and she said. She was upset that there were still courses on the Holocaust at the college. And her line was, we shouldn't be teaching anything on the Holocaust because it's white on white crime.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's a great line.
That's like Whoopi Goldberg said that it's not race.
Exactly.
Holocaust wasn't racism because they were both white.
Yeah, right.
Even though Hitler said that the Jewish race, but
Right. So you know what I'm saying? There is a strain of this progressive ideology and this anti-colonial and this critical race theories. They all marry to each other, intersectionality. And one of the things they all say is, if you're white, you're guilty. If you're a person of color, you have something interesting and important to say. People should listen to you. And you can't complain if you're white. and people of color aren't racist. They can't be by definition because they're oppressed.
Thane, last question, because we're coming close to our break and they're going to make me get out of the studio. But we could maybe I'll have you on from afar. We'll have a hash out a few more issues. But I do want to ask, just in general, we're coming up to an election. See, the president was, you're also a legal expert, so I'm going to use you a little bit. I don't want to get into all his cases because we don't have enough time, but the president was just shot at again, or they tried to shoot at him twice, assassination attempts in like 2 months. Former President Trump, Kamala, we explained the problems that we have with her. And it seems to me that a little bit like Israel, where everybody hates each other now, we're at a place in America where you can have rational conversation with people you disagree with.
There's no liberalism.
Yeah, there's no liberalism from both sides. So are you optimistic for Jews and for America? Because I think just even as an Israeli Jew, I would love for America to be back to its glory days, the American dream, American exceptionalism. I think America has a great promise to give to the world, but it's not there right now.
But that's racist.
Well,
what you just said.
I'm a racist.
That's how scary that is.
Exactly.
The fact that you believe in American exceptionalism is, by definition, racist.
I agree. But do you think are you optimistic in any way? Because we're very depressing, both of us.
No, I'm a truth teller, and people don't invite me anywhere unless they're ready to hear bad news. I deliver bad news. No, I'm worried. I'm worried that we're headed to a civil war. I mean, I'm prepared to say
with guns and weapons.
I don't know what it'll look like, but what I see, and I travel widely, what I see, it has the earmarks of a certain level of intolerance for the other side and a sense of, when Hillary Clinton used the word deplorables, she tapped into something that Donald Trump had already captured. He saw it. He's no genius, but he saw this.
Yes.
And that's the reason he picked J.D. Vance.
Why?
Because J.D. Vance came from the Appalachians.
Yes.
That they would love.
He was the deplorable.
He was the deplorable. He just happened to go to Yale Law School. But he was exactly what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. NASCAR, chewing tobacco, country music, hillbillies, beer, football, right? All of this stuff. Non-Ivy League and white and elite.
And men.
Straight. And so this idea... and then the progressive movement in the last few years pushed things that America was not ready for. Yeah. The transgender movement, Black Lives Matter, in the way in which they saw everyone was called a racist. There was no other way to get around it. This led to a kind of a polarization, a divide that the election is only mirroring.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried, because the election is so close, because it's so close, we're in danger.
We're in dangerous
of
territory.
Either side not accepting the outcome.
Whoever will win, I think there'll be protests and riots.
It's going to be awful.
Yeah.
And I was around and I did a lot of media as January 6th was happening. And I remember thinking part of the problem is that the January 6th rioters think, well, people who rioted for Black Lives Matter and burned cars and police, why would they be arrested?
Exactly.
Nobody got arrested for burning police cars and looting stores and attacking people and burning police precincts. Why would anyone be upset for us running around the Capitol? Yes. And the fact that none of those people are in jail, and there are people today that are still in jail from January 6th. These things have had an effect. And the problem is the country is a wide country. The coastal elites don't fully understand how they have been received by the interior.
Yeah.
And that's where that is Trump country. And Trump, that's why he does rallies, because he knows they'll come out, that they see him as representing them, which is so ironic given the fact that he's from here and he grew up as a real estate tycoon. But
he gets them, I think. Even if you don't like Trump, he understands his audience, his base. And just lastly, I think, and you'll probably agree with me, you spoke about Trump's base, but the other base, all the people that we just spoke about, the people who will call you the racist, if the biggest racist of them all is elected, there will be riots from that side as in maybe even worse than from the other side if that happens.
I'm worried. You heard me. I don't say the word civil war lightly. I say it with great trepidation.
Do you think also, just lastly, just don't get into it, just as a yes or no, if he loses the election, he's probably going to jail, right?
No, I don't think so. I would be. Look, I thought all of those cases were flawed, with the exception of one piece of one of the cases, the documents case and the obstruction of justice, not the
one here in New
espionage,
York.
the nonsense.
But he was found guilty.
I know, but I think all of them would be overturned. I believe that if he didn't pardon himself, if he won, I think that they, in the end, would need to be they're filled with so much legal and factual error that I never thought, I wasn't surprised that he would be found guilty.
Right.
Certainly,
it's in New York.
Yeah, it's in New York, and a jury would find him guilty. But I did think that they're all flawed, all of the cases. Now, again, because I've said that, I'm a racist. You know,
you're a racist. We're both.
But I didn't vote for him.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying nobody cares, right?
Nobody cares.
I didn't vote for him. I have a lot of problems with this guy, But I'm a legal analyst and I'm a liberal. And that makes me be a truth teller.
Racist.
And so I'm prepared. Yeah. And by definition, a racist.
Yeah. Thane, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
A little
Ariel.
bit depressing.
Very depressing.
Very depressing.
But I told you, no one invites me for good news.
But I'll just say before we finish that the uplifting thing is that we in Israel, with all our problems, there is a certain sense of community in Israel. So when we look at America with all, the big America and, they're not having a war like we are and this and that, but Americans hate each other and can't stand each other and they call each other all the names that we spoke about. When you come to Israel, the worst, at the end of the day, there was a war. Everyone was protesting. October 7th happens. In the same tank, you have people who are protesting against Bibi, people who are protesting for Bibi, people who are, in the settlements, and people who are in the peace now, and they're all in the same tank, and they're all dying together and fighting together. And I think that's something that you won't see here.
Look, I was in Israel once for Yom Ha'atzmaut, and I was with in a house filled with a lot of existing and former Supreme Court justices. And some of whom had been in my class when I taught, and they would take sabbaticals.
Don't tell us how old you are.
Yeah, it just tells you how old
exactly.
I am. That I had Supreme Court justices who would come through, who would take the month of October or something, and they would take my class for 3 weeks. And so I was always invited to things like this. And I remembered thinking on how all of them, the families, all the justices got up and sang all the patriotic songs.
Yeah.
And nothing like that would ever happen in the United States.
Not
on
now.
July 4th. Well, no, for 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
For 100 years, you would not see that level of patriotism.
That's very sad.
For America, patriotism is hot dogs, on July 4th. People really have no real connection to how young a country this is, and how old a democracy it is, and how much we owe to the founding fathers. This country,
they're all white racists and slave owners.
Exactly. So I'm saying, when you said the sense of solidarity among Israelis, I do think that makes them unique. And I hope that 100 years from now, the Israelis will continue that level of connection to their historical, ancestors that
I hope so,
made the country, because it just doesn't exist here in America.
Yes, it's very depressing, and because we need America, like we said. So thank you very much, Thane Rosenbaum. It was a pleasure. It was depressing, but but it's important to know what's happening and to get ready for whatever comes next, because if you close your eyes, it doesn't mean it's not happening around you. So thank you so much, you guys, for being with us from New York with Thane, and we'll see you in our next episode. Thank you so much, Thane.
Thank you, Ariel.
It was a pleasure.
Enjoyed it.